It's April wrap-up time. The light is fading, the battery is dying, so let's get on with this. The first book that I finished in April was the fabulous and devastating A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. I've done a full review of this and I will link it in the description. Needless to say, this is brilliant and went straight onto my favourites shelf. Then I finished A Dance with Dragons by George R.R. Martin. I've been listening to the series as audiobooks and they do work really well in this format. I was able to get through them surprisingly quickly as well. I didn't enjoy this book quite as much as some of the earlier ones. I tend to enjoy the more character-based writing rather than the action-filled stuff, but the whole series is excellent and I'm really glad that I've read them. Next was Yes Please by Amy Poehler. I'm really into the female feminist memoir on audiobook at the moment, and as you will see, I've listened to quite a few of them this month. This was delightful and funny. It wasn't my favourite of the lot, but I can see why a lot of people love it, especially if you're a Parks and Rec fan. Then were a couple of classics. I read Madame Bovary. I don't have particularly strong feelings about this, but I think that it's another one that's really important to know in comparison to other literature. Lots of more contemporary works reference it, so it's really useful in that respect. I think it might be quite an interesting one to compare to other classic novels that have a woman at the centre, and also the differences between male and female classic authors and how they treat their female protagonists. I'm looking at you, Thomas Hardy. The other classic novel that I read is a bit more modern. It's A Tree Grows in Brooklyn by Betty Smith. This is a real coming-of-age story, and I must say I did enjoy it more than the likes of Catcher in the Rye. One of the themes that she explores closely is that of poverty, and for that reason this really reminded me of Janet Frame's Owls Do Cry, which is a New Zealand classic. Next was Fried Green Tomatoes, or Tomatoes, at the Whistle Stop Cafe. This is by Fanny Flagg. I read this one because Nicole from Wolf's Whistle cited it as one of her favourite books. And this is a really heartwarming sort of a story. I enjoyed it, I didn't absolutely love it. I think initially I put this down as 4 stars, but I've brought it down to about 3.5 star. My views on books do tend to change over time though, so I may change that again. I feel like this would be quite a good one to discuss though, so if anyone else has read it, please do let me know. An Audible had What If by Randall Munroe as one of their daily deals this month. This is a book that had been particularly popular in the shop, especially over Christmas, so I was kind of curious as to what all the fuss was about. The subtitle of this is Serious Scientific Answers to Absurd Hypothetical Questions. It was very well narrated by Will Wheaton, but I felt like it lost something in translation to an audiobook. I've had a look at the actual book and there are lots of drawings and diagrams in there which really bring it to life. So I'd say that if you are going to read this as an audiobook, it's well worth having a look at the physical copy as well. Then I read the original vampire story, Carmilla. This is a story where the protagonist's friend and potentially lesbian lover turns out to actually be a vampire. That's more or less the story, and I feel like it could have been a bit further developed. But if you want further development of this, there is the wonderful web series. I'll link it in the description because it's fantastic, and I think they do a superb job of taking the source material and turning it into something really fantastic set in the modern day. The Martian by Andy Weir has been a much hyped book on BookTube recently, so I thought I'd give it a whirl. This is another one that worked really well as an audiobook. It's surprisingly fast-paced and funny and witty for a book that is essentially about one man stranded on Mars. I enjoyed this. I wasn't utterly blown away with it, but I think it will make a perfect film. And in some ways it is very cinematic in the way that it's written. Now, I've watched a few episodes of Orange is the New Black. When I saw that the audiobook was on sale in April, I decided that it might be quite a good idea to read it. I found it really interesting to see which parts of the series were actually true to the book and which parts were fabricated. Turns out that quite a lot of it was over-dramatised, but I suppose that's to be expected. As with the television show, the book is a really interesting look at the lives of women in prison in America. I think she does a really good job of pointing out the flaws in the judicial system, as well as highlighting the humanity of her fellow inmates. Really eye-opening read and well worth your time. Next, I read my first novel by John Irving. This was In One Person. The protagonist of this is neither straight nor gay, and a lot of the novel is about him coming to terms with his bisexuality. This is more than just a coming-of-age story though, because it spans most of his life. As you might expect, this novel has straight characters, gay characters, and it also deals with transgender issues. I found this novel to be very interesting, very heartfelt, and there's just so much in here. I really enjoyed it, and it was one of my 5-star reads of the month. A quite different but equally excellent book was Spinster, Making a Life of One's Own. This is by Kate Bollock. I heard about this book through Book Riot and Goodreads and immediately put it on my to-read list. This ticked a lot of boxes in terms of what I enjoy in a memoir. She explores what it means to be a single woman in today's society and also what it's meant in the past. And she does this through examining her own life as well as those of some of her favourite authors. Some of the authors I hadn't heard of before this book. Perhaps the more famous ones are Edith Wharton and Charlotte Perkins Gilman. I also found it really interesting when she talked about what she did after finishing education, which is something that I have a particular interest in at the moment, having just finished university. I'd say that if you're interested in feminism and gender roles, then this is a really, really interesting read. The next book that I read was Breakfast at Tiffany's by Truman Capote. I had mixed feelings about this one. I had already seen the film, and the film left me with a similar feeling. I really wanted to know more about the character of Holly Golightly. I feel like the way she's portrayed in both the film and the book, she's a bit of a manic pixie dream girl, but you can tell that there's so much more to her going on behind the scenes. The relationship between the narrator and Holly Golightly is quite like the relationship between Christopher Isherwood and Sally Bowles in Goodbye to Berlin. And on doing a bit of research, I found out that Christopher Isherwood was quite a big influence on Capote's writing. I tend to think that Isherwood does a slightly better job of writing Sally Bowles. In Capote's defence, though, the Holly in the book does seem to have a bit more depth to her than in the film, as much as I love Audrey Hepburn. Then I read Zami, A New Spelling of My Name by Audre Lorde. This was an absolutely fabulous read. It's a memoir of Lorde's childhood through to early adulthood, and it chronicles how she deals with being black, female and homosexual in the early 20th century. So her life itself is really fascinating, but the way she writes about it is superb. Her language is beautiful and lyrical, and it worked really well as an audiobook. If you like books like A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, then this is better. I think it's really sad that this isn't better known. I saw on Goodreads that a lot of people have marked it as to read, but not so many people have actually read it. So if you take anything away from this video, it is go and read Audre Lorde. Speaking of phenomenal, has everyone heard that Toni Morrison has a new novel? It's called God Help the Child, and it's really, really good. This is available on audiobook as well, and it's a really quick read. It amazes me how much ground she manages to cover in such a short novel. It's about a young girl called Bride, and when she's born, her mother is shocked to find that she has really dark skin. And we see how this affects the way her mother sees her and the way it shapes her as a person. It does deal with some really heavy issues, especially to do with child abuse, and this is quite different to anything by Morrison that I've read before. I've only read 2 of her novels, but as far as I can tell, this is quite different from anything she's written in the past. For one thing, it's set in the present day, and the language is quite different. I also felt like there was a touch of Murakami in there, so if anyone's read it and felt the same, please do let me know. Finally, I read Notes from an Exhibition by Patrick Gale. Now, I picked this up because Patrick Gale has a new novel that's just been released. It's called A Place Called Winter, and I really wanted to read that one, but I'd heard excellent things about this one, and it was available at the library, so I picked it up. The shininess of the cover is really screwing up my white balance, so I will put it down. But this follows a character called Rachel, and at the beginning of the novel, she dies, and we have flashbacks of her life through the eyes of her children and other people around her. Rachel is an artist and is also bipolar, and we see the way that this has affected the people around her. I found this to be quite a slow read, but it really does pay off in the end. There are some twists and turns in the plot that I really wasn't expecting. I gave this a 3.5 star, but I think I might bump that up to 4 stars. And I can't wait to read Patrick Gale's new novel. So there we have it. The light has faded significantly, and now I've got this lovely orangey glow from the light bulb. This is what happens when it's no longer summer. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I will hopefully see you next time. Bye.